Welcome to It's Not You, It's Grief, a safe space to have candid conversations surrounding the many faces of grief. How do you handle the process while moving forward and ultimately getting back to living in the moment? Come on this journey as we navigate grief through the art of storytelling. And now for your host, Ahira Smith.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to my wonderful podcast, It's Not You, It's Grief. My name is Ahira Smith, and I am the grief mending coach for a special episode for the month of October. I know I've been away for a little while, but I came back on my vacation for this special episode that resonates with me so close to home, as I know it would resonate with a lot of people who choose to listen to this one. And this month, October, it represents a lot of different things for different people. We know that October has been recognized as Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And we also know that it also represents Domestic Violence Awareness Month. However, what a lot of people have not been privy to is that October also represents Pregnancy Infant Loss Awareness Month. Yes, this is a month that recognizes those who unfortunately have lost a child through a miscarriage or have lost a child in their infancy. And it is one of those things that hits close home to me. For those of you who are not aware, I had suffered a miscarriage several years ago. It was the first time I had ever been pregnant in my life, and I was excited to become a mom. I always wanted to be a mom, but things happen for a reason, and unfortunately, my daughter is in heaven. And so anything that helps people talk about miscarriages, infant loss awareness, providing support, whether it's through referrals, whether it's having these conversations, I'm all about it, whether it's for the women who have experienced this personally or the partners who have experienced it indirectly. I'm definitely here for the conversations. And what is so interesting is that in 1988, Ronald Reagan, our former president, Ronald Reagan, had declared October this month for Pregnancy Infant Loss Awareness Month in 1988. So this has been almost 40 years. And he made a profound statement saying when a spouse loses their significant other, they are known as a widower. When a child loses a parent, they're recognized or they're identified as an orphan. But when a parent loses a child, there is no word for that. I'm basically paraphrased it, but it has, the first time I heard it, it has stuck with me. And so now I am having these conversations with a multitude of people so we can be more comfortable in spaces to talk about this that impacts 1 out of 4 women. I mean, 1 out of 4 women have unfortunately have gone through a miscarriage. And that number is greater than that, unfortunately, those who have been diagnosed with breast cancer, which has been, I believe, 1 out of 6. And even those who unfortunately have gone through a domestic violence situation. And not to say that one tragedy is greater than the other. They're all impactful in some shape or form. However, we need to have more of these conversations that resonates with us on a day-to-day basis. And because of that, I have found a wonderful person who I wanted to have a conversation with. Her name is Miss Danielle Ross, who is gracious enough to share her journey, her truth regarding what it's been like for her, experiencing ups and downs of becoming a mom, in terms of trying to become a mother, being a support for other women like myself who are still on that journey of wanting to be a mom wholeheartedly. And I know that there's multiple ways that people can become a parent, foster parents, adoptions. However, for those of us who still want to embark upon that whole experience of carrying the child to term, it's a little different. And so Danielle was kind enough to say, I'd love to come on your show, because there is grief involved with it, when it's not working as the way we plan out. However, we could still find a silver lining. We could still find hope, regarding some of the setbacks that she and I have encountered. And so she is a certified life coach. So she can definitely help people, especially women who are looking to embark upon not only motherhood, but just woman and life itself, to get the most out of what we have on this journey, as well as the fact that she is a supporter for women who are looking to be single mothers by choice, which, more and more women, especially professional women, are looking to do that later on in life. The choices out there as far as waiting for marriage and or having the right partner, a lot of times it's just not coming to fruition. And so a lot of women are taking the decision to either push having their children back at a later time in their life, or they're just like they're ready to do it now with or without being in a relationship. And so I commend her for that support, and I love having these type of discussions. And so without further ado, I would love to bring on Miss Danielle Ross. Hi, Danielle.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you for just letting me share my story. Like if it just helps one person, then it means something. So my loss, I know, wasn't in vain. And I'm just working on turning my pain into a purpose. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you for accepting this invitation. I do appreciate it. So I would love for you to just kind of give us a snapshot look. I know, it may be a lot, whatever you feel comfortable, in terms of being transparent regarding, all that you have encountered as far as trying to become a mom. But I just like to know exactly your story as far as what has brought you to this point.
Yes, good question. So, for those that are wondering, I haven't always been a life coach. It's just something that I feel like I'm like, okay, with my experience, why not help people in the midst of this? Because I know I felt so isolated and I still feel isolated. And I know you feel lonely. And it's just like, what do you do with that loss and that pain? And as you brought up that quote, it's like when you lose a child, there's nothing like it. And a lot of people, some people still can't relate. Other people tell you their story, they'll tell you other things, but it's just there's nothing like it. And that pain stays with you for so long. And there's so many triggers. And so, I've been able to kind of hear stories from women where just going into the baby section is a trigger, working with kids is a trigger, that anniversary of their due date, all those things. You hear a child laugh, it's a trigger. I worked in a call center for many years, and just hearing a baby crying on the phone, that person has no control over it. I can't hang up and end the call, but that's just what I'm faced with. And so my story started many, many years ago. So like say mid 20, let's say 2013, 2014, that's when I first got married. And so for me, I've grown up in church. So I did it, kind of the way that everyone kind of expects, where, both my husband and I at the time had saved ourselves for marriage. And I hadn't really thought about infertility. I knew a lot of people in my family didn't have a big family. So knowing that people in my family had like maybe one or two kids or three kids, but not like 8 or 9 or 10 kids. And so just never thought about it. I knew, and when I was getting married with my now ex-husband, that there was like this 10, 12 age year kind of gap between him and his brother. So it's something that I kind of kept in mind, but just didn't really think about it. So we tried and tried. And then when I got married, I was about 25, 26. So then, didn't really think about it. And then they always say, okay, if you've been trying a year, year and a half, then go get it checked out. We went to a specialist that didn't even really like look at me. He didn't even examine me. And he's like, well, you and your husband have a 1% chance of having a child on your own. And I'm like, well, you haven't done lab work. You haven't, how do you know? And I was in another state at that time. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, okay, here's some, fertility medication. And then I'm like, okay. And we didn't try it. And then end up finding out, just kind of was unexpected, and kind of had this change of life events, end up finding I was pregnant, and I was excited, but we didn't tell a lot of people, thankfully. I just am always cautious, more private. And in that, not just thinking a lot about it. I didn't want to get my hopes up. And then not to trigger anyone, but I was at work and had started bleeding. And I went to the emergency room, and it was this whole traumatic experience to where it was this whole thing where they said, oh, we thought you had left. So then they said, oh, we called your name. It was actually the wrong name. They ended up calling. So I was sitting there for hours, and I just sat there, and I just sat there because part of me cried because I was there 4 or 5 hours at least. And I went up a couple of times. I'm like, hey, are you guys going to call me? And then do all that. They do ultrasounds, everything else. And they said, oh, sometimes people just bleed when you're pregnant, and that's just expected. And that was that. And they kept going. And so from that, I end up going to like this little place that was near me where they do ultrasounds and parties. And it's just like this third party. And they were doing the ultrasound. There's 2 girls that I'm not even sure how well they were trained. And they said something on the ultrasound is not right. And they had actually ended up sending the ultrasound to my doctor. And so with that, everything just kind of got rushed from there. And this all happened when I was about almost 5 months pregnant. And so from that, they saw the ultrasound, saw a specialist, and he's like, yeah, your baby's legs are not moving like they should be. We're not seeing this. And then from there, seeing my doctor, and he's like, yeah, your baby has this from the ultrasounds. And it kind of gets me because of that whole time they hadn't caught it. And I'd had ultrasounds, had other things. It didn't get caught. And so from there, went from planning like a baby shower for my baby to saying you need to be induced within a few days, and this is when we're going to induce you. And so their whole process is kind of like jury duty. You call every single day, and they're like, oh, the hospital's full, call again tomorrow. And that was my experience. And so it's just heartbreaking because it's like, what do you do? So in that, thankfully, I had a doula. She had a miscarriage. She coached me through it. I tried to look up the specific condition. So it was limb body wall complex that my baby had. And she was developing like in a U shape. Her spine was curved. The organs were developing outside of her body. There was just so many things that could go wrong, went wrong. And so in that, from that, no one really prepared me for it because I think, I'm just thinking, oh, you get induced and you have the process and that's all. No, it was 19 hours of labor. I still had to push, end up having her. And thankfully, I got a chance to hold her. I got pictures. I have her handprints and her footprints. So Baby Hope is what we named her. But nothing prepares you for that, to do all that. And then, I remember the nurse talking to me at like 3 a.m. They just sent me home. And that was all. No one told me about my milk coming in. No one told me what to expect. No one told me about bleeding, nothing. And so that was just my experience. And that's what I was in. And so that was just that. I just started a new job, so I didn't have time off. I had maybe 3 or 4 days off and then had to go right back to work. And that's when I was working in the call center. Thankfully, I had a supervisor that was really caring, had this close connection with her. And one day I just broke down crying and she sent me home, but I didn't have family. Like no one said, I'm sorry for your loss. Didn't have the spousal support because I, realized that spouses grieve differently, which I didn't understand at the time, but now I get. My mom was there, but she didn't know how to be there. And then, once people at church found out, then all these people kept saying, oh, I've had a miscarriage. It was 20 years ago. I had a miscarriage 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh, so it's not just me, but still with church and my faith, like still no one, you're just kind of left with that. And that's all. And you're left with the things, oh, it just wasn't God's time, or not yet. Oh, you're still young. All those phrases that I do not care for at all. And so in that, kind of fast forwarding the story, because of course I go on and on and on, the Cliff Notes version, right? But in that, end up having a daughter, thankfully, but that was still a rocky pregnancy because I was on hospital bed rest for 6 weeks. And when she was born, she wasn't breathing, almost lost her, other things that happened in that, but now she's 6 years old, which is a blessing. And then kind of fast forward to 2022, end up, after that being divorced for some years, things happened. We won't go into all the details there. End up in just a not good relationship that just was not healthy and was toxic, and was getting ready to leave the relationship, found out that I was pregnant. And that wasn't expected at all. And I know people will judge and they'll have their things, but it happens. Life happens, just have to repent and move forward. And so in that, end up having a ectopic pregnancy at 6 months. 6 weeks. And so I Went from finding I was pregnant like at 3 or 4 weeks, not really sure what I was going to do because I was leaving a not so good situation, and then end up spotting. And so that's why, once again, I didn't get my hopes up because I knew I had this history of difficult pregnancies. End up spotting, went to urgent care, and they're like, oh, just follow up with your doctor, sent me home. And then the next day was in the emergency room, and knowing something was wrong, was in so much pain. And they're like, oh, well, if your pain gets worse, come back. They sent me home while I'm having an ectopic pregnancy, and then end up driving myself back, barely making it back to the hospital, had emergency surgery. Like, oh, I just thought, okay, it was gonna be something basic, laparoscopic. I woke up, had 15 stitches, couldn't walk, had to just kind of recover and kind of get over it, and took like 3 days, and just that was life. And so that was my 2022, and then ended up getting an infection after that. And it's just all these things that could go wrong. And they're like, oh, after 8 weeks you get better. I still have pain from it. Sometimes it's debilitating, that no one talks about and no one can do anything with. It's just take Tylenol and you keep going. So that's kind of my story, and that's my why, because I realize so many women go through it, and you don't know how to wrap your mind around it, and how to deal with the triggers, and how to process it, and how not to just cry throughout the day. It's okay to cry and it's okay to grieve, but it's just helping women find a safe space to talk about it, because a lot of times partners don't know, spouses don't know, sometimes see those at church don't know, even just looking for just a grief support group, and seeing that there wasn't even one in my area, and having to, they're like, oh, there's one like 100 miles from here. And I'm like, well, that doesn't, what am I going to do with that? This hurts now. I'm going through this now. And, having that first loss, dealing with it alone. And then the second loss being 2 times alone. So, that's just kind of my story, and that's my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, first of all, allow me to offer my sincere condolences to you on all that you've been through. Um, the fact that you are even able to put in the words, because I felt everything that you said, because it happened to me, not to the same degree as far as um regarding the first pregnancy. Um, just the lack of communication per se, and the support afterward. There's so many questions I want to ask you. Everything from the fact that, the the people expect you to go back to work shortly after having such a major event like that happen. The relationship between you and your husband at the time, and what that did to you both, as a couple and even individually, uh even with that of the community, in this case your church family, when you had some of the mothers of the church who were like, oh, I had one 20 years ago, or I had one 10 years ago. And again, you're like, oh, it's not just me. But the fact that nobody has talked about it, excuse me, it's like it's brought on to you as well, in knowing that other people have gone through it. The lack of education, not only in terms of how much information is out there, but even those who are in the medical field, who are supposed to know what's going on, but they gave that impression to you, like they didn't know, or they weren't as expertise or knowledgeable. It's just, I'm processing it right now, because I know, and I know for me listening to it, I'm processing it, but I know for you still processing it in some shape or form, and it's been years, and I'm just, again, I'm taking it. I'm taking it all in. So knowing knowing now, well, knowing if you knew then what you know now, do you feel that I'm trying to be mindful in terms of how to ask this question.
No, it's okay. Go for it. I'm like, just go for it. It's
Really?
okay. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm ready.
okay,
I'm ready.
okay. Knowing then what you know now, do you think you still would have wanted to be a mom?
I honestly, I that's a good question. So when you bring that up, so for my second pregnancy, I lost in 2022. I had gone
Mm-hmm,
to a doctor, and he
mm-hmm,
said, "Oh, well, out of after I told him some of my stories, like, well, out of all the things that you face, why would you want to have another baby?" And it broke
mm,
my heart because I'm like, there's this doctor that's supposed to be helping me. He's like, "Are you sure you want to get pregnant again?" Not realizing when I was in his office, I was actually pregnant, and he didn't do a test or anything like that. That's when I was having that baby, and I didn't know. That's that I guess would be a third baby in that case. And so in that, it's worth it because even now there is that fear that the same thing can happen over again, that there could be complications, I could have another loss. But to be honest, I would do it again. To me, it's worth it because it's worth it to have my daughter that's 6 years old. To me, not trying is not a solution, and I know some people, and I don't want to say by giving up that means that anything less of you. So I don't want anyone to think like that for those that have had to stop because for their health. I've spoken to women, there was just as too much for their health and it was risking their life. And so by giving up or saying, okay, we're going to adopt or be a foster parent, which is a route that I've taken now, being a foster parent, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I'm like, it's worth trying. I didn't want to give up. I knew it's just something in my heart. And people said, oh, we'll just work with kids. Well, I work with kids that have special needs. I've become a foster parent, and I still have that space in my heart. That space kind of gets like filled up a little bit when I work with kids or have been a foster parent or foster children, but it's still not the same of carrying that child again and holding that child that I don't have to give back, or different things like that. So to kind of answer your question, I would do it again. To me, it was worth it because, like, the experiences that I went through, of course, I wouldn't wish them on anyone. I wouldn't want to go through them again, but it's things that have happened to help me learn and that have helped me to be the person I am today, to learn compassion and empathy and so much more and kindness around it and things that I wouldn't have been able to learn other ways. So, I don't want to say, oh, it was worth it. It was so great and everything like that. People go through these traumatic things. And they're like, oh, yeah, I did this and I climbed a mountain. I survived this fire, but for me, it's just like by going through it has helped me to grow. And it's like I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be able to help people that I have due to everything I've gone through.
okay. I'm curious, what lessons, when it comes to grieving or when it comes to grief itself, what were the lessons that you learned the first time you had your miscarriage versus the second miscarriage you had in 22? What were the lessons that you learned regarding grief between those two different types of miscarriages?
Yes, I think one of the biggest ones is just self blame because the first time around, I'm like, if I had taken folic acid earlier, if I had taken
Mm,
prenatals earlier, if I had done this, if I had taken better care of myself, if I wasn't as stressed out, all these different things to once again it happening again, but having no control over it and having no way to prevent it. It was an ectopic pregnancy. There was nothing I could have done. And of course, people have asked me, oh, well, why couldn't you, done this? Or what if you done this? Or there's people that have had ectopic pregnancies and they saved the pregnancy. So why didn't you do this? Or some people say, oh, it was an abortion. There's so many things that people have said. I've gotten judgment all the way around from people, but in it, I've learned that to just be kind to myself because it's like everyone grieves differently. And, both experiences have really helped me take a deeper dive into grief and saying, okay, just because this person isn't crying, like I'm crying, or they don't talk about it the same way, they still experience it. I'm like, okay, the grandparents experience grief, other people experience grief. I'm an introvert and an only child. So, I don't have like that big family structure, but I'm like, well, my mom grieved in a different way, even though to this day I don't quite understand. Like I wanted more support from her just to hold me or to just explain it to me, even though she didn't have that same kind of loss. But for her way of grieving was making a Christmas ornament, for my daughter that passed the first time around. The second time around, it was kind of like an I told you so moment, which we won't jump into that. But in that, it's just kind of the family structure. So, how family handles things. But, I know that she still loves me and it still hurt her too, but she's never voiced how she felt about it. So realizing that different people grieve differently, realizing that grief can break up relationships, it can change friendships. So there's people that I've been friends with, but I still have to kind of keep them at arm's length because they have the 6 kids, they've had the oops and the different things, and they're just like, it's hard to really relate. They said, "Oh, Daniel, I'm sorry for your loss." I'm like, "Yeah, but you have 6 kids." Or the person that I met, someone recently that has the 5 kids and talks about, kind of the stress of it all. And I'm like, I can't, just be friends with you right now. We can still talk, we can do things, but just hanging out with you just hurts right now. And I can't, give it my all. And so realizing that's okay. It's okay to say no to the baby shower. It's okay to say no to buying a gift for this or doing it at my own time or my own way, or not being able to stay for the whole virtual baby shower, different things. It's okay to celebrate differently or at your own time, or maybe go to that person and say, "Hey, I'm still struggling. Like, it was just recent, the anniversary of that loss. This month is going to be hard for me. So I
Yeah.
can't really give it my all." And I hope that you're understanding of that. And sometimes they won't be. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh, why are you being selfish? Why can't you just be happy for me?" Or all the things that people will get or say. But at the same time, just speaking it is healing for me, and it's
Right.
life-giving. So I realize that I have to be kind to myself, realize that my body can only do so much. I'm not going to punish my body or punish myself, but say I can take better care of myself. I can step back. I can say no to some things. I don't have to say yes to everything. And some people are not going to understand it, but that's okay. I have to do this for myself and for my sanity and for my mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I'll be honest with you. Um, so October is such a big month for me because it's my birthday month. So, I always love the month of October. But obviously it's different now that I've gone through this myself. And so with all of the stuff that's happening in terms of fall season and the holidays, I always kind of find myself going through the children or babies area, and I'll sometimes look at something, I'll be like, okay, let me just detour, so or if I'm really in a good headspace, I may even just pick up a baby outfit or something, or I'm like, oh, this is what she would have wore if she was still here, and for some strange reason I may even buy it just because I'm like, okay, this would have been hers, but this is what I want. Or I just may buy it and then give it to somebody who just has a child that could fit that size, and then just because I know for me it it doesn't fill in the void that I have, but it just gives me a little silver of hope. It gives me that sliver of hope of what can still come. So I definitely believe that boundaries do need to be in place, because again, not everybody gets it. My mother she was born in the 1940s, so stuff like that isn't a conversational piece versus somebody who might have been born in the 60s or 70s, where they're maybe a little bit more open. And so when you sat there and mentioned about your mom and you and how she grieved on the loss of your of her daughter or granddaughter, or even how she handled her own experience, that speaks volumes, because again, these are conversations that we don't talk about. We don't talk about the miscarriages. We don't talk about the child that passed away in infancy. We don't talk about all the stuff that's happening with our bodies as far as fibroids is concerned, and some of the other um so you mentioned about the infertility, and I've spoken to a lot of women who unfortunately are not able to have a baby because of some of the issues that we just mentioned about PCOS and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, why is it we're so quick to have these conversations about, oh, well, here's this baby shower, or here's what's going on with little Tommy, this and that. But yet when it comes to those of us who are struggling or not able to have a child, it's like, don't talk about it. So it's like, don't ask, don't tell type situation. I never understood why we can talk about all of the good, but we can't talk about stuff that we're struggling with. I never understood that. I never understood that. It's
Yeah,
just
that is so
it's it's
true.
it, it's frustrating. So how has your how has your spiritual journey changed?
That one's a good one. So that's a heavy one. So honestly, For me,
Because I know it has. Because I
yeah,
know
it
it has.
yeah, things like that will rock your faith. And sometimes I see it as people will lose their faith, or
Mm-hmm.
their faith gets stronger, or it's just like they feel like you get this plateau in your faith. You're just like, I'm just not going to open up my heart, just not going to think about it. Or it's easy to overly spiritualize it, say, oh, okay, well, because of sin in my life, God knew that I didn't need this, or different things. There's so many different directions you can take it. And so I remember when I had my daughter, I waited so when I was able to officially have a baby, I had her baby shower after she was born. So I felt kind of cheated, but I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. And so in that, I was able to get up and just say, how God gives and he takes away and how he gives. And so there was people that are emotional and I was able to say it. And I felt proud in the moment, but it's still those times where it's just the frustrating part, where that's kind of where I am now in my faith, where before was primary infertility, where, I wasn't able to have a child. Now my body was able to do it. And now it's secondary infertility as I try again on my own to have a child. And it's just this whole thing of like, I'm part of Facebook groups and I see other women that are Christians talk about egg freezing, and they'll get 100, 200 comments where they have to turn off the comments. That so many people comment, you're not trusting God and you're not in God's will. And this, and they get bashed over the head for it. And then speaking to other women in other countries where they don't even have like the same opportunities, their internet is blocked from even looking at certain websites. And I'm like, things that we take for granted, and saying that a lot of times before, like, okay, you can't even freeze your eggs if you don't have, cancer or another condition. And I'm like, but what if, something comes up? And so for me, it's just been this knock to my faith, because I'm like, okay, well, if God's not going to bring someone my way to marry, and I'm like, I had it recently where a Christian guy got rejected by a Christian guy. And I'm like, okay, well, there's guys that aren't Christians and they accept me. And then the Christian guys, and I'm trying to do things the right way, and then get rejected recently, like less than a week ago, and still sitting with that. And it's just like, just kind of sitting here. So I'm like, okay, God, I know you have something better in store for me. But as I'm approaching 40, I'm in my mid 30s, late 30s, approaching 40, I'm like, I need to figure out something. And for me personally too, I have fibroids and PCOS and this mass that they found, and they don't know what it is. So to get it taken out, I've been told that it could render me infertile. So it impact my ability to have children. So I can either sit with the pain of it, which is something that's constantly causing pain, get it removed, but then might lose my chance to have children. And so I'm like, well, God, if you haven't sent someone my way, and I have this is really time sensitive, and I can't keep living with the pain, what do I do? And so I just feel like, I hear him answering other things, and he provides in other ways that I feel like he's kind of silent on this. So it's kind of like the struggle in my faith. I still know he's still here. I still trust him, still serving, and still so much more. But at the same time, like, well, God, if you love me, then why aren't you working in this way? So I'm like, I see your love and provision in other areas of my life, but what about this area that's so important to me? You see the grief that it causes, this loss, that this desire is so great to have children. I'm like, even just meet someone that has children, like something, just, get kind of like, just something, just your grace in it. I just need something, favor, I don't know. So it's been a knock to my faith in many ways. I'm still trying to hold on to my faith, but there are some days where it's just hard to hold on to hope. I try and encourage other women to hold on to hope, but it's hard to do that when I'm struggling sometimes in my faith. And when, as I stated, no one talks about it in church, just pray about it. He did this for Elizabeth. He did this for Sarah. I'm like, I know the stories of Hannah. I know the stories of Rebecca, and I'm like, okay, and Rebecca and Leah, and just reading Rebecca, and it's like, God remembered her. And I'm like, well, God, can you remember me? It's like that verse I hang on, and it's just another verse, blessed is she who believed was spoken to her by the Lord. And can I tell you where exactly the verse is? I don't remember it this second, but it's just ones that I just hold on to. And yet I'm holding on to them. But it's like, okay, as Christmas comes around, Thanksgiving comes around, you see all the baby items and all the commercials. It's like, okay, once again, that time of year, I'm reminded of just this season that I'm in. And as I, another negative test, as I'm working, found a donor that's nice and that's safe. And yet it's still month after month after month, just another negative test. And I'm like, I just, what do you do with it? So that's kind of where I am. So it hasn't been easy. I haven't lost my faith completely, but just some days are easier than others.
And that's real. Let's be transparent. That's real. I'm one of the things about me and how I am in this state of Where I am in my life right now, I don't have time for no fakeness. I don't. I just be authentic, be organic. And there are times when you are just like, what the bleep, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we have to allow ourselves to be in that moment because it's not all of roses. It's not all of rainbows and sunshine. There are times when it's just painful, you know, and I think when we acknowledge the pain and we give ourselves permission to acknowledge it wholeheartedly, then when those good times do come, we are much more appreciative of what we've been through in order to get there, you know. So I think it's important that we just be transparent about that because there are a lot of people who aren't raised in that of a faith-based home, you know, whether you're a Christian, Catholic, you know, Muslim, you know, Buddhist, you know, everybody's faith is not the same. But I do believe that everybody believes in something higher than themselves, you know, regardless of the name that you give your spiritual person. Me, I believe in God. I believe in the Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's just me. But
Yeah.
I do not diminish anybody else's experiences when it comes to grief and those who are seeking to find healing through that grief regardless of what faith that is because it's a journey, you know, and as you said everybody grieves differently, so everybody's faith is going to be different as well. So I think it's important that we just bear that in mind that it's okay that it's not all the same, you
Yeah.
know. You had unfortunately an optic pregnancy, you know, where somebody might have had a baby almost a full term, and unfortunately there was complications, and that person unfortunately had a stillbirth.
Hmm.
The loss is still the loss. It's just maybe of different greater. It just depends on the person's connection to that loss, but it's still a loss, you know.
Yes.
Doesn't make it one bigger than the other. It's still a loss, you know. So I think it's important that we continue to have these candid conversations and and honestly to have the conversations with those that we continue to build relationships with or even those who we intend to have a relationship with because that is a factor, you know, when you're building relationships, whether it's another friend or somebody with a partner, these kind of conversations have to be made in order for people to understand if it's on the same level or if it's a situation where, you know, we are just, you know, I don't know if we're going to be talking. I can put you in the friend zone or I can put you as an associate. You know, it's just different. It's just different. So if I can ask, what exactly, um, how did the grief, did the loss of your child, the first pregnancy, did that impact your relationship with your marriage?
It did. I feel like that's a really good one. And I've heard some people where they're just like, oh, it held our marriage together and we weren't going to give up. So I have met women where they actually that's just something as simple as they were expecting the baby and then it was just a cord defect. So the cord is around the baby's neck, everything else was fine, you know, and it was just that's how they were in it and they're still together and their marriage worked and they kept going. I met other people that said they've lost a child after the child was born a couple months and they stayed together. For me, that wasn't the case. There was many other factors, you know, in it. But just I feel like that was one thing that just kind of divided us because, you know, just it was just this thing that we just didn't talk about. And then just after having the child, it still was like grieving that previous child. And there was just many things, you know, that just kind of shook our foundation that wasn't the strongest to begin with. So I realized that. So in that, I've been divorced 3 years now. So, you know, we were married for about 6 years, six and almost about, yeah, five and a half, about 6 years, but our marriage just didn't survive it, you know, and I've tried to, you know, pursue other relationships, but it's different. You know, I'm like, okay, do you mention it on the first date? Hey, my name is Danielle and I struggle with infertility. So I might not be able to give you those children that you want, you know, things like that, or even in Facebook groups where I'm part of singles groups. And there's men that are like, I want someone that can be a stay-at-home mom, and I want this homesteading life, and I want this, I want them to do this, this, and this. And you're just like, yeah, but I might not be able to give you the children that you want, or different things like that. So it really does impact relationships. And not only does it impact friendships, family relationships, but that romantic piece. When there is a guy, a man that wants kids, and you might not be able to do that. I've spoken to some women where they weren't able to ever have a child, and their husband was understanding. Their husband had already had a child, and then they went on to adopt children, but it's still something that's difficult for that person, even though her children are now adults, but it's still something that's still, like, I feel like that she's still has. Of course, it's not something just ever goes away, that desire to be a mom, and she wasn't able to have children. So
Yeah.
For me, it impacted the relationship. And of course, it is something that breaks up relationships. It's real. It makes sense. You lost a child, and both of you just someone feels like someone's to blame, or you just don't talk about it, which doesn't help. And it's always there. It doesn't go away. 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, it shows up in different ways. So
yeah. I think that's definitely I mean, again, we're talking about being organic and transparent. I think that's essential, for people in my age range, which is 40 and up. There are some of us, I know a lot of women who have yet to have children in their 40s, and they still want to have that desire, where some of the people that they're meeting partners wise, they've already had their kids, or they're like, nah, I can have it, or I don't have to have it. So it's like one of those things. It's like, okay, you need to have these kind of conversations, because again, you're like, hi, my name is so and so, and I struggle with infertility. Is that going to be a problem? It's when do you talk about that? Is that before dessert, or is that after appetizer? So that way, does the bill get paid before you bring stuff like that up over the meal, or Starbucks? And I just think we just need to be honest, and we need to it does we have to be self-aware on where how far we can go. And there's also a level of vulnerability that definitely that will come into play. There isn't a time when I'm looking at a baby and I'm like, hey, cutie, and then I'll just lighten up, and then all of a sudden something will trigger me, and I'll be like, okay, it's a trigger. I know it's a trigger, but it's going to be okay. And I'll just let the moment hit me. And then I'll be like, okay, want to pinch the baby, or, I'll flirt with the little baby. I'll see like a little baby this morning, and the baby was like 9 months old. And I'm like, oh, okay. If I was 6 months, we would have been squirting milk at each other, something like that kind of makes me smile. But then it gets me in that thought process. I'm like, would my son, my daughter be doing that? But these are conversations that need to be had on a consistent basis, not just like one and done. We got to have these conversations with people that you meet, because you just don't know. You just don't know. And he might have lost a child, in a similar fashion, where, like you said, it might have broke up, and then, does he want to even go through that experience again? And is he willing to step out on faith to do that, or find alternative routes to still find that, fill that void of being a parent? So it's challenging. It's challenging. I don't have too many more questions, because again, I know we can spend a lot of time on it. And again, I'm so appreciative of you taking time out of your busy schedule to just kind of share with us about this topic. So one of the questions I have is, now with you being a certified life coach, and you are working with single mothers who or single mothers by choice. Are you also open or able or working with men who want to be single parents by choice too, or is it just strictly for the ladies?
A good question. So, yeah, right now it's only women. I feel like I'm not prepared or just equipped to kind of speak to that. That's a whole nother thing. Now, I
Mhm,
do it informally. So, I'm a part of different like Facebook groups. So, like, there's this whole thing of intentional platonic co parenting, which is a long word, but which is where you find someone that wants kids and you want kids. There's no romance involved, but you decide to have a child together and raise that child together. So, I have spoken to some men, like just a man yesterday, realizing that men get baby fever too, and I've spoken
mhm,
to men like informally about how they feel about being a donor and the challenges they face, but I don't have specific services geared towards them. A lot of my services are mainly just for women because I know it's even harder for men that just want to kind of keep their legacy going or that struggle that say, hey, I'm a donor, but no one wants to date me because I have 50 kids all over the, United States
wow.
and then other countries. So yeah, so I have met donors where, they're nice guys, but then they do have like 50 to 60 kids all over the world, and just kind of thinking, how do you explain that to someone, or saying they're in a relationship or marriage but they want to donate. And so that's a whole nother thing, that is a challenge where they, their spouse can't have kids or partner can't have kids, but they're willing
Mhm,
to have kids with someone else. And that's something that's serious. That's something that's a whole nother kind of thing to talk about. But I do, there are, I'm sure, some support groups for men that can reach out,
mhm,
because that is a whole nother thing, that men, they're not meeting someone, but they maybe just want a child or they just want to keep their legacy going. So,
mhm,
there might be some Facebook groups. I know some of the groups I'm part of, the men do speak up and they do say, well, why is it that, women do this? Or as a
mhm,
donor, I feel this, or they have questions, they bring them up. So do, feel free to kind of like look up donor groups,
mhm.
depending on where you are in your country. There are groups where men can kind of talk a little bit more amongst themselves and kind of share how they're feeling. But my services are geared more towards just mainly women, as they're
Okay,
going through their challenges and struggles.
okay, okay. So do you do anything to kind of commemorate your children who are no longer with you? Or I mean, and that's such a two-part question. So when people ask you how many children do you have, do you tell them you have one, or do you tell them that I have one here, but I have two in heaven? Like, because I know sometimes I in the early when I first had my miscarriage, I was like, oh, no, I don't have any children. But then after a while, I'm like, wait a minute, I had a daughter. I'm acknowledging my daughter. My daughter may not be here with me on earth, but she's in heaven. So I still acknowledge her. So one, when people ask you, or when you're meeting people, how many children do you have? Do you tell them the number you had in terms of your pregnancy? And my second question is, for those children, for those two children that are not here, do you do anything to kind of commemorate or celebrate them? And if so, is it on the days that they would have been born or the days that they transition? So it's really three parts. Sorry.
No, it's okay. That's fine. That's good. Usually when people ask, sometimes like people are just asking questions to just, sometimes for me, it's people just being nosy. And other times people genuinely want to know. So I just usually say I have one daughter. The
Mhm,
only time it usually comes up is honestly when I have a doctor's appointment or something medical, I'm filling out paperwork and they're like, how
mhm,
many live births have you had? And what was this? And even
mhm,
sometimes now as I am joining, like I'm trying to find support in my area. Now it's like at least 7 years later for my first
mhm,
miscarriage. And they'll ask like sometimes it's detailed question, like, I just wanted to volunteer, or I just wanted your
mhm,
newsletter. And they'll ask, what was the date? How did they pass? When did they pass? And I'm like, I just wanted to greet people. So sometimes it's a little intense as I'm trying to join these chapters and, partner up with other organizations or just join groups myself. But in
mhm,
that, I will just usually say one child. And then for me,
mhm,
something that's really been healing for me is I've created, not to like push a product or anything, I'm not trying to sell anything. I've created this care and comfort kit that it's still work in progress, but in it, there's like these plantable seed packets. So it's like a heart or one that says in loving memory. And I said, that'd be so great to give to a woman that just wants to plant a garden. Like for other family
mhm,
members that we've lost, we planted just a rose garden or just a
mhm,
plant, something
mhm,
tangible that you can see. For my other daughter, since we're in this case, for my first daughter, baby Hope, I have this little memory box. So I have her fingerprints, her handprints. I have the ultrasound. I actually have her blanket that I was able to
mhm,
keep, and a hat that was made for her. The hospital made this beautiful bracelet with her name on it. And it was just nice that they did that. But I know a lot of hospitals don't do that. Before I would open the box in September. So that would be like the yearly anniversary of her passing. But now
mhm,
I feel like I'm at a different point. Sometimes like it's going to take me down too much. So I have the box. It travels
mhm,
with me. Every time I move, because I move frequently, but I see it at the top of my closet and I'll look at it. But now I can't open it because I know it'll make me spiral. So I just know
Mm,
my limits, I know my boundaries. But other than that, I'm like, okay, let's get a journal together with journaling prompts, something that can help people. Just little things like that, or just sharing her story, I feel like
mhm,
has been healing for me. So talking about her before, it took many years, and I don't want people to say, oh, she just has it all together. No, I just started talking about her in the last year and a half. So it's
mhm,
not something, it took at least 6 years just to be able to talk about her, my ectopic pregnancy. It took time to talk about that too, because I felt shame, I felt guilt, I felt embarrassed, I felt a mixture of things. Some of it was things I put on myself, some things other people I felt like kind of put on me too. But
mhm,
in that, just sharing the story has just been life giving for me. So, I don't go through like the list of, oh, I've had 2 other pregnancies that I've lost. Because even when I tell people in the medical field, they're just like, oh, okay. And then they just keep going. So it's like no one says, oh, I'm sorry, for your loss. Oh, that must have been hard, because I think they just hear it all day, or they don't know what to
mhm,
say. Or honestly, they probably don't care too much, to be honest. It's just they're going through the list
mhm,
of questions. So I just usually just say, hey, I have one daughter that's alive. And then to commemorate that loss, it's doing, podcasts like this, connecting with others that have gone through similar experiences, and just sharing my story, and working on an ebook, and just other things to just help people heal in ways that I wish I was able to heal so much sooner. I waited so long. And part of me is like, why did you wait so long? And the part of me just knew that I just didn't feel like I had a safe space.
understood, understood. So my second to last question to you is, what words of encouragement would you give to women who are struggling to get through their miscarriage, whether it was recent, whether it was years past? What words of encouragement would you tell us women, or even, even parents who, fathers or partners who were indirectly impacted by a miscarriage, to give them hope?
Yes, good question. So, really do, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, be kind to yourself and realize that it's not your fault. And I've had to continually tell myself that. And when I wrote that down, I had to really take it and run with it, because I'm like, well, I can write this down. My heart doesn't believe it and my mind doesn't believe it. And so I just have to keep reminding myself this affirmation that my losses weren't my fault. And I say, oh, I could have done this, or I should have done this, or I should have done this. But that doesn't mean anything in hindsight that wasn't your fault. And people say, oh, because I was addicted to this, or because I ran too much, or because I failed, or because I didn't get
Mm,
screened sooner. There's so many things. Yes, there's a lot of what ifs, but at the end of the day, I realize it was not your fault. And then other encouraging things is that you a lot of times you're going to want people to understand and to be kind, especially family, but a lot of times people are just not going to get it. And at the end of the day too, you just have to kind of accept that maybe even your partner might not get it. So that's why I really encourage people to reach out for help, because I was watching a TV show recently, and this woman had lost a baby, but her job was to deliver babies. And so in that, she almost took her life because of it, and they considered a mental breakdown. This was like in the 60s and 70s. And in it, it's just more PTSD, complex grief, as now we identify it. And I feel like a lot of people, we get to that point where it's just like we just don't want to be here anymore, or we
mhm,
just can't get through the day. Or I've heard people, they just stay in bed for hours and hours, and they just can't get up, they can't move. When you get to that point, please reach out and get help. There are organizations where even you can text anonymously. There's
mhm,
support groups, there's people that do understand. For all the people that don't understand, or they give you a hard time about your loss, or don't care about it, or don't think about it, there's just as many people that are willing to say, hey, I went through the same thing, let me just go beside you. So like when I had that first loss, there was an agency called Miscarriage Matters, and they partnered me up with someone that had a miscarriage, and I had her for a couple weeks. And I'm like, I wish I could have kept her longer. And then also being in counseling, that helped. And I know a lot of people just culturally, people are like, why would you go to a counselor? Don't tell the family secret. I'm like, if I don't know what the family secret is, how can I tell it? But in that, just really saying, for my mental health and for my
mhm,
healing and well-being, I need to talk about this, because just holding it in and being at the grocery stores, you stated, trying to veer away from the baby aisle. Well, now I've been in some stores where the chips are right across from the baby food. I'm like, what cruel person does this? Let me talk to the manager who puts the popcorn and the chips across from the baby aisle. And sometimes I
mm,
try to be around them. I'm like, but I really need those chips for tacos tonight. So things like that. But in it, sometimes it's unavoidable, and I can't take the detour in the store. And there's sometimes where I just, also kind of to bring that up too, sometimes it's like, it's okay to just, like set that boundary for yourself. So there'll be times, as you mentioned, where I'm in the baby section and I'll just look at the baby clothes and just touch an item and say, you just the what ifs. And then there's sometimes where I just allow myself to cry. I won't break down crying in the store, try and kind of hold that back. But there's times where I just say, this really hurts right now. Or kind of this new phrase I'm thinking about it, just infertility is unfair. It's not fair. And miscarriage is unfair. And I just sit with that and I'll just say it to myself a couple times. And that just kind of helps. And just say, this is not fair. And I can't do
Yeah.
anything about it. I know people will say sometimes we tell kids, oh, well, life isn't fair. And I've told many of people that many times, but in saying it, but I can still say, yeah, but that wasn't fair, and I'm like, it's okay to say it's not fair and it's okay to grieve
Right.
and to cry. And that's kind of the next part. It's okay to cry. It's okay to
Right.
grieve. You shouldn't have to just get over it. People say, well, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 months. Why don't you just get over this? You had another
Yeah.
child. So why are you still grieving? And you're like, no, I can still grieve. I can still, have tears on that day of the anniversary. I can still
Mhm.
say I'm going to pamper myself, but I still am sad. It still
Right.
hurts. I can't function that day, even though it's been 7 years later. I can still maybe just have that moment and just sit in that grief versus having
Right.
to just stuff it in the closet like I'm used to do.
Right. No, and I think that, and that's pretty much where it is for me, because of the fact that it isn't something you can't get over, can't get around it, you can't get underneath it. You really have to go through it. And after a while, it won't be as difficult, but it doesn't mean that it still doesn't hurt. It's tolerable. And that, I think that's the best way I can explain it when it comes to dealing with any type of grief, whether it's a loss of a life or anything that you're losing something, a part of yourself or a relationship or a home. It's part of the journey. But again, it is something that it's bearable as time goes on. So it's grief. That's what it is. And I think that's part of the reason why I name my platform, my podcast. It's not you, it's grief, because it is just that. It is grief. So my last question is, I know you're part of different organizations and you're doing a lot of work in the community. And I just wanted to give you a moment to just kind of let my audience know if there's anything that you're working on. I know you mentioned you're talking about an ebook or some projects or some service or anything that you're currently working on regarding that of your purpose.
Yes, yes. So I am the owner of Fresh Start Life Coaching LLC. And so in that, as I mentioned, like the care and comfort kit that I'm still working on. So working on Etsy and Shopify and all the other platforms and trying to figure out how to release that in e-commerce. Sometimes like I'm a dinosaur when it comes to technology, but working on getting all that together. I have actually been working on a series of webinars. So I do have a YouTube channel and can, send the link or include the link with the episode, but just webinars that are free, because I know a lot of people offer webinars. I get charging and different things, but sometimes we just need, it's like sometimes some are just like 17 minutes up to like 35 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, but just webinars are not like professionally done. There's no fireworks and other things, but it's just talking about my experience and just sharing, just different things. So I do have that. I also have a podcast, so the Fresh Start Life Coaching podcast, that's available, that has like 30 some odd episodes about a variety of topics, just how to handle their anniversaries or do's and don'ts of when someone has a miscarriage, what to say, what not to say, choosing a donor, my path to becoming a foster parent and realizing that's not exactly the path that is the best for me right now. And I'm like, I tried it, but it's just not exactly what I want to do, in it. So having that, and then I'm still working on an ebook. So all those things are like up and coming. I do have a website. So it's fslifecoach.com. So just just HTTPS, the forward slashes, everything else, just FS. So F is in Frank, S is in Sam, lifecoach.com. So that's another way to find me. If you just want to talk, I do a free initial consultation. If you're interested in services, feel free to reach out. Or if you just want, someone to just talk to, overall, I'm here. I'm also working on setting up a support group to meet up. So something that I've been kind of considering and committing to prayer and saying, okay, is this the right time, the right season? So have some things kind of up and coming. And it's like all these things at once, but little by little releasing them. I don't want to just throw them out there, just like, like a fire hose and you flood people with it, but realizing that the need is there too. So there's many ways to find me. I'm on YouTube. I'm still working on the Instagram and everything else, but can be found on Facebook. It's, facebook.com, start coaching life. So it's just start and then like capital coaching and then life. So it's another way, feel free to friend me, follow me, other things, whatever works. But look forward to connecting with those, and just please reach out for help, for those that just are at this point where just the tears are there and they're not going away, or just want someone to talk to, you just feel isolated. There are resources. I'm here, there's others here, there's podcasts, there's therapists, there's free resources too. So please do reach out.
Absolutely. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for sharing your story with me and my audience here on It's Not You, It's Grief. I really do appreciate it. This is again, a special subject for both of us, and it resonates with us on levels that not too many people can identify or connect with, but it is one where the bond is very strong for those of us who have embarked upon it. And so I just thank you so much for talking and sharing your story, your words of wisdom, your tips, suggestions, and just answering the call as far as continuing to be an advocate, to be a spokesperson when it comes to women who are struggling with infertility and dealing with miscarriages, even though the multiple miscarriages. With October being, again, Pregnancy Infant Loss Awareness Month, I couldn't think of a better way to come off of my vacation and talk about something that we need to talk about it. And October 15th happens to be a day of remembrance for those of us who have lost a child. And so usually 7 o'clock, depending on everyone's time zone, we try to have this candle light ceremony where we light a candle for those of us whose children are no longer with us, and we just let the candle be lit for about an hour, just a time of remembrance. And whether we meditate, we pray, we talk about it, we get together, support groups. October 15th is a day of remembrance for those of us who are are mothers to angels. That's actually what my t-shirt here says. It's like a mother of an angel. It's a little, it's a heart and it's got butterflies, because when you mention the Miscarriage Matters, I'm a part of that organization as well. And I'm a full supporter of that in terms of helping raise awareness and raise money for it, because we need more information out there to help all people involved with such choices that is not freely given. It's out of our control. So again, thank you so much. For those of you who want more information, please read the description. I will have her information on this special episode for Fresh Start Life Coaching. Again, I'm here, she's here. There's a lot of us coaches out there who are just willing to help people on their journey called life. A couple of things I just want to remind people that, we need to start giving ourselves permission to grieve. That's the first thing we need to do. We live in a society where we're not really given permission to do so, because we feel like we have to get back to the way things were or get back to work, and it just doesn't work like that. Life does not work like that unless you will it to be so, and we need to also honor the grief, take that moment to recognize the loss, whether it's a child, whether it's a parent, whether it's a relationship, honor that, because it wasn't all bad. There was some good moments in it, but honor the relationship of that grief, honor the grief itself. And then finally, when you have given yourself permission to grieve and you're honoring that grief, eventually and hopefully you'll start to realize that there is greatness in grief in some capacity, and that's what I'm about, giving permission to grieve, making sure people are honoring the grief and recognizing that there is greatness in grief. And so with that, thank you everybody for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on another episode of It's Not You, It's Grief. I hope you all have a blessed Sunday. Take care, and see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, being intentional, and sharing this moment with us. We at It's Not You, It's Grief deeply understand the many facets of grieving, and we want to make sure we can be here for you. Again, thank you for listening, And tune in again wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.